Welcome to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism in Modern Life, hosted by Adam Piercy and Mick Mulroy. Welcome back to Pub and Porch, Applied Stoicism. I'm your host, Adam, with my co-host here, Mick Mulroy. So, Mick, you and I are sitting down to the microphone. It's been a little bit of time since we've been able to sit down and record an episode together. What's been going on with you that's new, maybe news you're willing to share?
Yeah. So as you know, my son got married.
Yes,
So that was
many
that's big.
congratulations.
It was great to Miranda. Interesting that she was my daughter's friend growing up. So she was already a Mulroy daughter, to be honest. So,
Yeah.
but now they are married. We told them basically we're always going to take her side, just so you know. So my son's, literally, he's got his one of his sister's best friends, and his mother's already treats her like a daughter. So it was great. But it was, as I told you, Recon Marines, Army Rangers, a lot of Irish, and some Arabs. She's half Lebanese, half Irish.
Right.
So it was an interesting cabal. It was a very chill wedding, and it was literally a lot of Irishness. So we have a lot of family traditions with colada rings, and
Yeah.
of course shots of Irish whiskey and such. But and it was really cool. But so we're expanding our small numbers in the Mulroy tribe, and it was really cool. And you, I think, have started a new job.
Yeah, I have. I recently changed jobs. I still work in the space program, but now I work in, we would call it satellite infrastructure, which is like essentially the network that's being built around satellites in space.
Oh, yeah.
And I've just finished 2 weeks there. And it's been a lot of fun. It's an incredibly positive atmosphere. The people and culture division, which is people would think that's HR, but it's a lot more than that. The people and culture division do a really good job fostering the onboarding process,
What's
which was
culture
great.
division? Is that some Canadian thing?
People and culture? No, it's basically, this is very, I've never seen this called this way to anybody else. It's basically human resources, talent acquisition, and I think one other thing I'll put together. But in this company, very specifically, there is like a huge impetus on the culture of the company itself. And so I think they just wanted to stand out a little bit, and they chose this name, which now that I've been working with them for a couple of weeks, actually is really fitting for them because it feels very people oriented, and the culture is incredibly positive. And so that's how it is. I don't know that I would say it's a Canadian thing. I think there's probably other people and culture groups out there, but this was more, diversity is a big part of what they do. In fact, they had an onboarding for diversity to talk about what they do at the company for that. But it was more about culture of the community of the company.
All right.
So like I had to talk
Not
to
opposed
PNC.
to it. I just never heard of it. Talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to talk to PNC about being on this podcast, for example, because they were like, we want our people. Like, you don't usually hear a company open with things like we want our people to be leaders in the industry and go to events. And I have some events coming up this year where it's like, oh, so you guys are like all for that, even though it might pull me away from the office every once in a while. So, pretty cool.
That is cool. And I was going to ask you, this is your area. We all saw that catastrophic explosion of the rocket on the Blue Origin launch pad. Obviously, a problem, but how big of a problem is it? Because I'm a space geek, not a professional, but like I follow it as a hobby, almost like Stoicism. But from what I'm hearing, it's going to set the program back quite a bit because it demolished the launch pad. Is that right? What's your profession?
Yeah. So the Blue Origins, which is it's one of the private, we could call it a private space company right now in the sense of it wasn't specifically a NASA run launch sequence, but they were doing a fueling test of the first stage of the rocket, which is the bottom stage where the main engines are. And there was a catastrophic explosion, like you said. The effects of that are kind of interesting, right? Because the payload that they were carrying, which was a new constellation of satellites, that was not affected because the upper stage wasn't on the rocket at the time. It was somewhere else, at some other facility nearby. But if you see the pictures afterwards, right, like most of the infrastructure at the ground there is very flattened. And when SpaceX had a fueling test explosion like this a couple of years ago, it took them a year to get the launch pad back up and going. And so, it's kind of hard to tell right now, but I would say initially, right, the big thing that we're all wondering is what's the cause, right? Because the Blue Origin's rocket, it's called New Glenn. It uses what's called BE4 engines, which are engines that are used by a bunch of different space companies. Mm-hmm. And it looks on the camera like the explosion starts at the bottom of the rocket, which makes sense. There's a lot of plumbing down there, but you kind of have to ask yourself, like, what's the finding going to be? Is it going to affect the industry? The big thing, though, is that with the NASA, earlier this week, NASA did a moon base press conference where they announced a couple of new vendors, or supplier selections and stuff like that. So there's an accelerated push for launches to the moon, which puts, when you lose a rocket and other rockets are being taken for the moon stuff, you start to see a strain on the industry. You start getting into a lack of available flights to get your hardware on. So that's going to be the other big thing, I think. So the first thing is figuring out the technical issue. The second thing is going to be what happens to the industry's timelines, because if New Glenn isn't ready to fly and Amazon needs to, or excuse me, Blue Origins needs to get a set of constellations up, they either have to find another rocket or try and accelerate something. And we all have to remember too, most of these space companies aren't that old, that are currently leading the fray into the lunar world. And so, these are some of the hiccups that you see when back in the early 60s, when NASA was prepping to what eventually became the Saturn V, they had rockets blow up all the time. So it's probably an effect on flight schedules. There's going to be a technical impact for sure if there's something wrong with the engines that they had. And then, like I said, the last thing is really just schedules. That's always going to be a pain for everybody.
I saw that the plan for the lunar base is only going to be $20 billion. That's obviously a lot of money, but if put that in perspective, we've already spent over 3 times that on the war in Iran, right? We could have an actual lunar base for $20 billion. I was surprised.
So the plan is essentially, the first part of the plan is essentially 10 billion in the first 3 years allocated towards this. It's supposed to total 30 over 9 years. So like it's every 3-year cycle. They're meant to try and get funding increases like that. And at least, so I should say that I'm not an expert on this. This is my knowledge of the news as well, but that is kind of how the cycle goes, right? As you start getting funding and it comes in. And there's 2 things I take away from this. One, like, where did it come from? A lot of this is reallocation. There have been programs that have been paused or canceled, right? A lot of those, including the Gateway program that I was working on. But then on the other side of it, there's the thing where you have to say, it's sort of like, I always want people to know this. The space program is a tiny part of the budget. It is minuscule compared to other parts of the budget, right? But it yields really high rewards, right? Whether it comes to earth science or other sciences on the earth, like, because it's earth science, which includes ocean and air and all that stuff, but also to new technology development, right? Like Bluetooth came out of the space program, right? Microwaves came out of the space program, and you kind of go, oh. So I always try to remind people too, it takes a very small amount of money in comparison to get this stuff done. But the yield is really high. And so I always urge, like, local members of parliament here, I'm always like, hey, I work in the space program, what are you doing for us? Right. So.
Oh, cool, man.
Yeah. So it's been a busy little while.
Excited for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm a director now, which is my first time in this level. So it's scary and exhilarating at the same time. I think that's kind of how everything is.
Mr. Director, like we used to do in the agency. Mr. Director.
Yeah, Mr. Director. So today, though, and this will be a bit of a hard pivot, but that's okay. Today you and I were kind of talking about this in the background, right? Because we're entering into another round of political cycles, and we were kind of talking about selecting a political leader, like what are the kinds of things that we look for? And I'd love to get your initial thoughts on this one, because I know you and I have spoken a little bit about sort of, I would almost call it a pipeline of like, funneling certain thoughts through for long term. So, but what's your initial take?
Well, I mean, first we should start with where, well, at least I think we are, but not just where I think we are. You can look at the Gallup polls, for example. And I will focus on the U.S. just because
Sure.
it's the polls that I know or follow, I should say. But and leadership is across the board. Let me just start there, right? So it's not just political leaders. They're not the only leaders out there. We got leaders
Sure.
in academia, science, industry,
Yeah.
military, intelligence, diplomacy. We got leaders across the board, school councils, but particularly in political leadership. I think people now are super fed up with the level of corruption. It is staggering.
Right.
And the polls reflect that. You can just chat GPT it. I don't need to give you the statistics, but I mean, there's more people that believe in like the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot, and that Elvis is still alive, that actually approve of the U.S. Congress, right? So it's in the level of, and I'm not going to go tick for tat because the corruption's on both sides. And as soon as you bring up one side, then all of a sudden it's a partisan argument. I'm not a partisan person, but if you do that, then you miss the point, because it's happening on both sides. People seem to be coming in to serve, not everybody, but a large portion, to benefit themselves, right? Somehow they come in and they get government paychecks, right? But somehow they all become millionaires, and that is a series of issues, right? So it's willing to use information that only you have to, buy stocks or do the predictive markets, to funnel stuff to yourself. I mean, we're talking at the basic level of integrity. You're not supposed to go into service to enrich yourself. If you want to make, I mean, we're a capital, just like Canada, right? If you're all about making money, just go in the business world, be ethical,
Yeah. Yeah.
You can make a lot of money. If you're going into something that's service, which, I mean, it's again, and what I'm talking about is federal service.
Yeah.
To get wealthy, you're going to have to do it by corruption, right? Because you got your paycheck and that's it. So the issue, I think, is extreme in the sense that the people who these people are supposed to be serving have lost almost all confidence in them.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in our system, we have two parties, and the parties just basically, as soon as you question somebody's, integrity, and again, you could go down a laundry list of, there's people running for office right now that shouldn't be allowed to be a janitor at a high school. Mm-hmm. I mean, just from their proven ethical failings. You know what I mean? And it's on both sides. And we're now, I mean, I think you could practically just walk down the road and pick random people out, and they would be of higher integrity than people that are serving, at least right now, in leadership positions in Congress or the White House, right? On the White House on either side. So what I mean by that is different administrations. But sure. I think other than just point out the problem, there's got to be a solution. And of course, it's not going to be one solution. It's going to be many. Yeah. So the best that I would say is, and obviously I'm biased and you know where I'm headed with this, is that we need to get back to teaching ethics in school.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what we're teaching in school now, because our reading level now is like 1700s level, when kids actually didn't have public schools to go to. I mean, if you haven't looked at the reading literacy rates in the United States, they've gone off a cliff. So in addition to teaching, basic knowledge, wisdom, right, from the Stoic perspective, in innovation and all the things that we need our young people to be able to do now, especially in the world of AI, we got to get back to actually teaching them how to be good, Like, you're never going to be great, in my opinion,
Yeah.
if you're not good. Like, you got to start with that. And
Yeah.
that starts with, and this used to be taught in all schools. This isn't like
Right.
some crazy concept that Mick from Montana came up with. This used to be taught in almost every school. Basic ethics, Aristotelian ethics. They would teach Greek philosophy as the basis, right? I mean, this is every kid. This isn't just kids whose parents happen to be a Stoic follower. I think we need to get back to that. A good example, and I didn't go to this school, but is the Naval Academy. And I've spoken there a couple times. They're
Right.
like the last respite when it comes to like education based on Stoicism. They really are. They talk about it all the time. You run into a Naval Academy graduate, and they just know it. They just know it. And it's their basis for their ethical. And they brought in Nancy Sherman. I think a lot of our listeners know who she is.
I know Nancy. Yeah.
Yeah, she's exceptional. She was she's now a professor at Georgetown. I think she still is, and she writes about Stoicism, talks about Stoicism all the time. She wrote like the Stoic Soldier.
Yes.
Yep. Great book if you haven't read it.
Yeah.
But she started the ethical program at Annapolis, so at the U.S. Naval Academy. They brought her in because they had an ethical lapse. It was like cheating on something. On the test or something, right?
Yeah.
Happens in schools all the time, but for the Naval Academy, it's like whoa. I mean, we're trying to, build military leaders. They have to have the exceptional ethical foundation. So they brought her in to do that, and she created it. Although it already exists, right? You could think of Admiral Stockdale and others.
Totally.
She brought it in. So what am I getting at? I think there needs to be some component in public education. It doesn't have to be just Stoicism, although I would advocate for it to be the basis of it, to teach ethics, to start people off right. Because again, if you want to be a great leader, you got to be a good person. If you're not a good person, no matter what you do as a leader, will always be undermined. It'll always be viewed as self-serving. It'll always be viewed as something other than service to the people who elected you. And you can go down examples through history, at least from U.S. history, and I'll get into throw it over to you because this is a big topic, and I certainly think about a lot. But it is those core stories that you hear about leaders that isn't necessarily the big speech, the State of the Union, the small things they did that left an impression on people that matters. And most of those have to do with like core ethics and generally just being a good freaking person. Right. So we need to get back across the board, like not just political leaders, but political leaders seem to have the biggest failings right now, but across the board, teaching ethics to young people. So when they grow up, we have a different crowd. There's a lot of, this is the last thing, and I'll throw it over to you. If you listen to Harrison Ford's, he gave
commencement speech.
Commencement speech. Like he's basically saying his generation have blown it. That they got a lot of self-serving people in leadership that have exploited the very benefits that we were all handed to us by our parents and grandparents. Maybe he's being too harsh on it. I'm not trying to go after any specific generation, but there's a realization by people across the board that we're going in the wrong damn direction.
Yeah.
Like your handshake now is not your word. If you can get out of a deal legally, you do it. Right. It's just because you can benefit yourself. Right. Like there's so many things that have gotten away from where people really, their honor was like everything, whether you were a CEO or a street sweeper. It was really your honor that made you who you were. And that's not the way it's being viewed now. So anyway, much more to say, but your thoughts on this now.
Yeah, I think, right now, I think, I always look at the political spectrum and of elected people as being a mirror of what's happening here in your own society, right? And so, I think the way I look at a lot of it, right, and I should say, like, some of these situations going on and these investigations of people in certain positions, it's not specific to just where you're from. that's also happening here in my country, and it's happening in a lot of countries actually, frankly, right now. But I think there's this weird mirror that kind of happens where, you start to ask yourself, like, why certain things go this way. And, when you look at the values represented in the actions, not the words, but the actions, because actions do speak louder than words, right? I think that's the thing that people have to be looking at more. So, if, for me, what I see a lot reflected in the actions being taken right now, it is personal gain, it is capitalistic, it is very, like, it's always for profit, right? And that's the thing that I think we have to start thinking about is what are our core values that we want reflected in that mirror? Like, I want someone who is going to reflect my values of, you know, equal treatment for everyone and justice for everyone, not justice in the legal sense only, but just like treating everyone fairly. But also, I'm very proudly a socialist. So I want, usually I jokingly say that means I like trains and libraries and public school and public health care. But at the same time, I would like to see it reflected in my leaders that they take actions that are going to benefit as many people as possible, right? Compared to others, right? Who are going to make decisions that benefit only large businesses or only capitalistic gains, right? And that's a really important thing I think we have to talk about as a people, not just Canadians in their own world or Americans in their own world, but just in general. We as human beings have to talk about what we want to see reflected in these people. Like, it does not, when I really look at it, it does not faze me, or it does not seem it doesn't seem accidental to me that governments across the board talk about things right now like they're businesses, like it's all profit oriented and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what people have been latching onto for the last few years. Like in the last 10 years, right? It's like Instagram influencers and everyone's got a product and everyone's got a thing, and you've got 5 minutes in an elevator with someone or 30-second pitch or whatever, and just make money fast, do this fast. And it's like, okay, but the problem is, right, is I don't actually think that's business. I think that's capitalist, like for profit, which I don't know that is always the same, because I want business. Like if I think, when I think of for myself of a successful business, I think of something that, like, it has profit, but it also has continuity, and it lasts a long time, and it grows, and it cultures growth within its people within the business. But if we're always up for fast gains, fast turnaround, move on to the next thing, right? That's what I'm seeing reflected right now, right? It's like every political cycle, especially in the city that I live in, every political cycle changed the nature of public transit, right? There was new tube lines going in, then there weren't. There were GO trains going, and then there weren't. And then there were better rail. No, that wasn't happening. This or that, and it flip-flops all the time. So I really think we need to go back to this idea of, like, what values do I have, real values that I have that are positive, that I want to see reflected in my leaders? Because, and that I think starts with what you're talking about. There's an ethics, there's something like the four virtues of Stoicism that I think needs to kind of lead this charge, right? Because we're in a spot so many times over right now where it seems like, like I meet all these people that are business grads, but they're not in business, right? Like everybody gets a commerce degree, or everybody gets an MBA. And MBAs are fine. I'm not going to fault somebody for getting an MBA, but it's like, where did all the other stuff go? Like, why, everybody wants to be in sales. Well, why? What is that giving you? Do you have something to sell? Is there value to it? Or is it all about making money? And I think that's a real issue that I have with it. And I'll close with one thought on the money thing. Like, I heard an interesting argument recently where someone said they were really tired of hearing people talk about public transit endeavors, for example. It's like, well, it always loses money. It doesn't lose money. It was not supposed to be for profit anyways. It's an investment in a society. So this is where it's like, whoever is saying that, oh, well, transit's losing money, they don't understand, I think, what public transit's supposed to do, which is provide a service, not provide...
Which does help the economy.
It does help the economy.
People don't all have to have a car, right?
Exactly. No, and that's the thing, right? It's like, what endeavors can we take on that are going to do the most for other people? And honestly, what I would say to a lot of people, and you and I worked on a book. We were working on a book together a little while ago where I spoke about this, where it's like, you have to pick your values that are being reflected in the people that you have up there.
Yeah.
And that's a really important thing to me. And ask yourself, like, are these the values that I would want reflected if someone was doing a retrospective on me, if I was in that position?
Mm-hmm.
If the values you see reflected there that you're voting for are for profit, big business, not, tax cuts for people that don't need it, taking away services like libraries and public health care and public education and public transit, you have to ask yourself, like, what am I really voting for? I think. And that's a big question I think we all have to ask. What am I voting for that's going to be reflected in this situation?
Thank you for listening to the Pup and Porch podcast. If you'd like to find out more about the podcast or its host, head over to pupandporch.com, and you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple, or whichever platform you prefer. And if you'd like to help out with the podcast, you can find us on Patreon. Drop us an email if you have a comment on any past episode, you have a suggestion for future episodes, or you have an essay on an important topic for Stoicism. Send it to us, and then we can be reached at info@pupandporch.com. Today's music was provided by bensound.com. Until next time, Pup and Porch out.